Kia ora, and welcome to another drasha online on YouTube. And this time we want to talk about counting, social isolation, and the parsha, and try to put that into one. And really, in my opinion, my favorite Sesame Street character was the Count. And the Count, there's lots of memes out there about the Count, who's this kind of Transylvanian purple monster. And he loves to count. He counts his bats, he counts his organs, he counts everything. And he loves the Omer, because what do you do in the Omer? You count 1 day to the Omer, 2 days to the Omer, 3 days, That's the Count, and the Count loves that. There are memes on Facebook, you can find it. It is fantastic. And the counting of the Omer today is the 13th day of the Omer. By Shabbat, it'll be past 2 weeks already, and today's 16, 17. And it is a time to count from Pesach till Shavuot. But there's another person who did counting, and that is the person we're going to read about in this week's parsha. It's a double parsha, Tazria-Metzora, which is the person who gets tzara'at. Tzara'at is translated as leprosy, even though it is very much not leprosy. That was simply the translation of the Septuagint, the 70 sages that translated the Torah from Hebrew to Greek. And they all translated it in the same way in the time of the Greek Empire, because they were forced to. But really, tzara'at, we'll just call it tzara'at because it's its own disease. It's a spiritual disease. It is not a pandemic. It is not a disease. It is not something you can get vaccinated against. It is a spiritual disease that a person gets from speaking slander. Lashon hara. Lashon hara is speaking, even if it's true, something that could be damning or damaging to somebody else or to other people, even if it's 100% accurate. And if a person speaks Lashon hara, they can get tzara'at. What is tzara'at? The Rambam talks about what tzara'at is. Maimonides does. It was a sign and wonder among the Israelites to warn them against slanderous speaking. For if a person uttered slander, the walls of their house would suffer a change. If they repented, the house would again become clean. He continued his wickedness until the house was torn down. The other objects in their house on which he sat and on which or lay would suffer a change. If that person repented, they again would become clean. But if that person in their wickedness, but if the person continued their wickedness until they were burned, the garments which he wore would suffer a change. If they repented, they would again become clean. They continued in their wickedness, their skin would suffer a change and would become infected by tzara'at and be set apart and alone until that person is no more engaged in the conversation of the wicked, which is scoffing and slander. That's how Rambam describes tzara'at. And there's a progression from a person's house to their objects, to their clothes, to themselves, ultimately resulting in a 7-day quarantine. But let's take a step back. Who received tzara'at, and where really is what is the source? What is the origin of tzara'at? In the Torah, we learn that if you want to find out what tzara'at actually is, or what anything actually is, it's always best to go to the source, the first time that thing is mentioned. And this is a new concept that I came across just this week by a very, very influential and very scholarly rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Uri Sherki of Machon Meir. He also has his own website, a French-speaking Israeli rabbi. And he actually said that the first tzara'at is in fact the snake from Adam and Eve, the nachash from Adam and Eve. It is a very original perush, but he draws it from the Sifra, from one of the midrashic sources. And he says, he quotes as follows, "Ve'anachash haya arum Mikol chayat hasadeh asher asa Hashem Elokim. The snake, as he is described in the story of Adam and Eve, all the way in the back in the second chapter of Genesis, was arom. Arom could be translated as nakedness. Arom could also be translated as cunning. And the way Onkelos translates it, v'chivya have chakim. The chivya, the snake, was smart, was witty, was cunning, sharp. And he was essentially so smart that he was essentially a person. And Rav Uri Sherki, which is the first time I've ever encountered this perush, this commentary, said that the snake, in fact, was Adam. The snake, we always learn it, that there was Adam, there was Chava, and there was the snake. But he said the snake, in fact, is a person, or maybe a type of person, or maybe the Adam themselves. And the lack of ability to overcome one's evil inclination and achieve morality, that very state is the state of the Nachash. And what did the Nachash do? Well, all the Nachash did was talk, really. All he did was talk. He told Chava, he told Eve that she would not get harmed, get afflicted if she ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He even demonstrated it by pushing her to the tree. She touched the tree. Nothing happened to her. And he said, you see, nothing happened to you. Because Hashem said they'll get punished if they eat from the tree, not if they touch it. And the snake spun it in a brilliant way, but in a very wicked way, in a very evil way, ultimately leading to the damnation of all three of them, Adam, Eve, and the snake himself. Continues Rav Sherki to say, there is the word snake, nachash, is also in the same letters, nun, chet, shin, is also pronounced differently, nachash. If you can hear the difference, nachash is the emphasis is on the second syllable, and nachash, the emphasis is on the first syllable, spelled exactly the same way in Hebrew. And Nachash means sorcery, dark magic, magic that's used for evil. And Bil'am, the person who was destined to curse the Bnei Israel in the wilderness, but all his curses turned into blessings, ultimately said, Ki lo nachash b'Yaakov v'lo kesem b'Yisrael. There is no nachash in Yaakov, meaning the nachash. There's no sorcery within Yaakov. Everything that they do, every miracle that happens to them is not a result of sorcery. Rather, it is divine by nature. It is a providence from Hashem. But a whole other way of translating it is that the Nachash left Yaakov. The very snake that incited Lashon Hara, the first being, if you will, to start Lashon Hara ever, which was the snake, back in the story of Adam and Eve, has left Yaakov. And as a reminder of the Nachash having to leave Yaakov, when Israel is on a very high spiritual level, one person who would slander somebody else would receive the Tzaraat as the Rambam described in the various progressions until it hit their own body in a skin affliction called Tzaraat that only the Kohen, only the high priest, knew how to diagnose properly, if it was in fact a spiritual disease of Tzaraat or something else. Once they diagnosed the person of having that spiritual disease, they would send them outside to quarantine. And a person would count from 7 till 1. They would be in quarantine for 7 days. So you can imagine they're counting down 7, 6, 5 until 1, and afterwards they will be able to join society, rejoin their workplace, their job, their family, their social circles, because for those 7 days they spent in complete quarantine outside of the camp. They were physically distanced outside of the camp. This was not a pandemic. This was not a disease that affected everyone, and they were not contagious. This was something to teach a person a lesson, to give them time to reflect, a spiritual time out, if you will, but that was prolonged for 7 days. It is social isolation by design and also serves a higher purpose. And the Metzora counts down until the time they may rejoin society. But there is a whole different type of counting. There is the counting that we're involved in right now, that we're involved in every year. And it's a mitzvah to count, the counting of the Omer. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 49. Not only do we count the days, we count the weeks. So today is 13 days, which is 1 week and 6 days to the Omer. That's the proper way of counting. One can do it in English or Hebrew or any other language. But we don't count down in the Omer, we count up. And you can look, there's countless drashot about the concept of counting up versus counting down. And the bottom line of the difference between counting up and counting down is that counting up, you're looking forward to something. You are achieving something. You're refining something. There is a journey involved. You're not waiting for something to end. You're waiting to achieve something great. And that's what Israel did. The people of Israel, in fact, between the Exodus from Egypt to receiving the Torah, which ended up being 50 days, the 49 days gap from the day after Pesach until the finally receiving the Torah at Sinai, those were the 49 days where they worked on themselves. They spiritually refined themselves to get to the point where they were spiritually capable. They reached the level to receive the Torah. It took 7 whole weeks, 49 days. And those are the very days we count. So the question is, in our social isolation, even though we're going down to level 3, how are we counting? Are we counting up or are we counting down? In this past Monday, there was a very, very significant announcement, and I know a lot of people were counting down towards that announcement. You know, it's going to be in 3 days, in 2 days, in 1 day. I think this is the only time ever I've actually been in tune with news in New Zealand. I've kept up with it from time to time, but I'm actually listening to the news in recent weeks about what people think about it, what was going to be projections, how people are pre-reacting to the level 3 alert system. Is it good? Is it not good? Is it praiseworthy? Is it worthy of criticism? And there was this anxiety, but this also level of anticipation. When are we going to go down a level? What is it going to mean? What is it going to mean for businesses? What is it going to mean for immigration? What is it going to mean for all walks of life, for schools, for communities, for jobs, for people staying at home or not? And I'm not equating, obviously, COVID-19 to tzara. This is not a punishment. This is not, nobody knows the reason for the spread of COVID-19, of this pandemic affecting the world. But there is an experience of counting down, of waiting for something to end. Just like the Metzora. And the Metzora himself or herself, when they went outside of the camp, they actually had to reflect on something they actually did wrong, something they actually did that wasn't good. They were a damage to society. That is very different than the isolation we're in today. And so you can't equate the two. But that is the experience of the Metzora, social isolation by design. However, we are in the days of Sfirat HaOmer. We are in social isolation not by design, rather by necessity. And it's very different. And so maybe we can shift our focus, rather than counting down like the Metzora and waiting for this to end, to actually counting up. That's what we're actually doing every single day in Sfirat HaOmer, counting up 13, 14, 15, all the way to 49 until Shavuot. And we may or may not be able to celebrate it as a community in the shul. Nobody knows what the alert level is going to be or what the regulations are going to be at that time. However, maybe we can take the opportunity to count up, to seize the great things, the great achievements we can achieve during these times of isolation. You know, I know myself and other rabbis around the world that I've surveyed and asked about have actually taken more time, myself included, to learn, with our kids during this time. We'll also be able to provide learning opportunities online, and in many cases, including even in this community, some of the times where we've had online sessions, more people have joined than would necessarily join a class in a physical location. People have been taking biking more, taking walks, having time to reflect, thinking what is essential, what is not essential in life, evaluating and reestablishing one's relationships with the people in their bubble. And now soon we'll have the ability to very, very slowly and safely expand the bubble. And there's lots of things we can actually achieve during this time of isolation. There's lots of silver linings in these times of isolation. And by doing that, if we really seize this opportunity, even with all the challenges of being isolation and all the difficulties of keeping this social distancing, businesses still not remaining fully open, and our borders being closed, and our society not being fully functional, if we see those silver linings and we seize that opportunity, maybe we'll be more like the Omer and count up versus just waiting for this to end and count down. Shabbat Shalom.